Mate, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
We appreciate the effort to come up to Coogee and be a part of what we're doing. And I guess I'll lead out with, what do you think about the gym?
Mate, this is a great space. I think gyms are always interesting, right? Because you see as you mentioned before in our pre-chat mets, a melting pot of cultures, people, different things, different goals, different visions that happen inside this gym. What I love about the gym is I'm a big believer in the constant pursuit of some kind of self-betterment, right? And that's been a huge part of my life, not just from that can sound like a bit of a bro code thing to say now, right? Like I'm constantly pursuing better. But the truth is my life experience has been an effort to always keep my health in check, because that is the foundation of everything that I am with CF. And so I have a lot of respect for people who take the time and effort to come and be in the gym here. And it's like anything in life, if you're taking the time and putting the effort in to better yourself, you are essentially then one step away from, I think, if you can attach some intent and purpose to that, then you really start to find yourself in life. And there were periods of my life where I'd walk into a gym or walk into any pursuit of my world and show up, and there were results, there was consistency, there were things that changed. But when I started showing up in my life with a greater sense of purpose, well, I believe that really fuels progress. And so it's exciting to see people come into a space like this, beautiful part of the world, Coogee, Australia, nearly as beautiful as down on the south coast, the Illawarra, my home area. Jakey, you can probably speak to that too. But it's great to see. I'm always hugely in admiration of people who decide to put some energy into themselves.
I wanted to mention the cystic fibrosis, and it's a good segue because there's a lot of people that come to the gym and they always want to be here in perfect conditions. But obviously you're dealing with cystic fibrosis, which is a genetic disorder, but you've also got diabetes. When you look at that, a lot of people would use that as an excuse. You must know a lot of people that have cystic fibrosis. How many of them, those individuals that have that, and having any disorder is really, really hard. But when we can make so many excuses of why we shouldn't look after ourselves, why we shouldn't do the next thing, like you do the podcast and you work, obviously for the agency, and it's giving you the time to do what you're passionate about. But what was the turning point when you realised that, hey, listen, I got this, but I'm going to start to make some changes in my life?
It's an interesting question, because for me it probably wasn't, I guess, a middle point in my life in which I kind of fell off the wagon a little bit. And I guess what I mean by that is I was so blessed. I was born into an incredible family. I was the first child of, two-child household, beautiful parents who were really shocked and surprised when they were given my diagnosis. My mum had done everything in her power to have the healthiest pregnancy possible. Her and dad had worked tirelessly hard. My dad was a 4-job kind of person, 2 hours sleep at night, to make sure that he was bringing kids into the world, into economic stability, to a loving household where they could be present when kids come around. So we had this dream family home built in a cul-de-sac street, and I'm diagnosed 3 weeks after birth with CF, and it's a gut punch for my parents, because at the time they didn't know what CF was. There was a distant relative on my nan's side who had CF but was very unwell, was basically wheelchair bound because his lungs weren't able to produce enough oxygen for him to walk around and have some autonomy of life. And so at the time of my birth, I'm 28, going on 29 this year, born in 96, it was a bleak prognosis for people with CF. So my parents were just 5 months into my life, I believe, sat at my first CF specialist appointment. First time they're meeting this doctor, they walk into a hospital in Sydney. I won't name the doctor for soon to be obvious reasons, but he sat them down, and within a matter of seconds of saying hello and walking them into his room, he basically told them Brad would be better off with cancer because it'd kill him, or he'll get over it, and CF will ruin his life. And in a moment of pause to digest what my parents are hearing.
How old are you then?
About 5 months old,
okay.
Maybe 3 months old. My parents hear those words, and in a matter of seconds, I think the bravest thing that you can do as parents at that point in time was they stood up and said, "You'll never see us or our son again," and walked out of the room.
Wow.
And for me, that's a hugely defining moment in my life because I wasn't able to consciously understand that at that point in time. But with hindsight now, I can see that my parents didn't believe I'd be another sad statistic or the prisoner of a hospital bed. They refused to believe that there was absolutely nothing in their control that they could do to better my life. They walked out and they found a doctor who shared the same positive vision as them. And my childhood was the perfect picture of that. So diagnosed with CF at birth, liver disease at the age of 9, which once again is a product of my cystic fibrosis. The liver disease occurs in about 10% of patients, I believe. And then diabetes at 13, CF related as well. And so all of these diagnoses over the course of the first 13, 14 years of my life, and this medical record that's as thick as an encyclopedia, 50 tablets a day, but I was defiant. Like I was so well and so healthy. And at that point in time, my doctors were saying, if you continue to do what you're doing, you will never have a problem with cystic fibrosis.
So what do you do for it that's helped you out compared to those that don't follow your lifestyle or your food? Is it getting out in the sun, living in Wollongong? Does that all these things, do they make a big difference?
Well, it's a very complex disease in the sense that it would be remiss of me not to mention that I'm certainly a part of a lucky cohort of people with cystic fibrosis who were born healthy enough to have a fresh start. Right, there are a certain group of people with cystic fibrosis who at birth have immediate trouble with the gut, who have immediately filled mucus within their lungs, who have a difficulty from their first breath until the last breath of their life. And so for me to sit and say that I've been the master of my fate, to a degree is true, but also I would hate for anybody who feels like they haven't had that same opportunity as me to feel like that's saying that they're less than, because it's certainly not the case. But you are right, Metz, there were a lot of things in my early childhood which had a huge impact on how well my health was, and it was just daily exercise. So with CF, you're essentially, the root cause of the problem is a defective gene that affects the mucus-producing cell in the body. And so where that cell isn't producing mucus properly, it gets thicker and stickier and tends to sit on the organs, which impairs the function, scars that organ, and it can become a breeding ground for infection. So essentially what's happening within the body is this mucus is sitting thicker and stickier, and the only way to remove that is to shake it off and cough it up, right? And so exercise is an integral part in that. So very early, my parents knew the more physically active I was, the better off I would be. And it just so happened to be a huge blessing that I loved physical activity. Like my dream as a child was to be the next Brad Fittler. And the fact that we're sitting here having this conversation tells you that didn't happen, right? But essentially it was a great foundational love and passion for moving my body. And it's why I have such admiration for anyone who steps foot inside a gym like this. It was a huge part of moving that mucus off my lungs, which then meant my lung function, which is judged by 2 metrics in the CF world. The first being the capacity or the volume in litres that you can hold within your lungs. And they test that against the average for the age, the height and the weight of a patient. The other is how much of that capacity you can get in and out of the lungs within a second. And that essentially gives you an idea of the function of the lungs, how open those airways are and how willing and able the lungs are to move air around and to be oxygenated. And so because of my love for activity, I was a state champion sprinter, had very healthy lungs, had very little mucus on my lungs, which meant I had very little challenge with infection in my younger years. And the infections are the things that set you back as they scar the lungs, impair the function, some irreversible damage that essentially makes it harder to get air into the lungs and function in that same way. And so throughout all of my life, eating well, you have to eat a lot as a kid with CF because your body's using more energy to survive and thrive, right? Because of everything that's happening. So a lot of people with CF, and because of the gut issues that are linked with CF and the need for, I take digestive enzyme every time I eat something with protein or fat. So instead of my pancreas producing it, I take it through capsule form. So I was taking 30 to 50 tablets a day as a kid to digest food and to be able to grow and eat. And so it was a what doctors say was a miracle that I stayed at a healthy weight, and I've grown to be 6 foot or 5'11" on a bad day,
fucking
right?
taller
Say,
than
say
me.
6 foot. Say 6 foot.
6 foot, yeah.
Yeah, I
you know.
feel short next
Gotta have a
year.
bad day to be 5'11", so it's
Yeah.
I'm extra medium basically.
Yes,
So
yes.
it was, by all reports, a miracle for me to be, with the diagnosis of CF I had and the genetic mutation I had, to be as healthy as I was. And then at 16, I hear those words from one of my incredible doctors who sadly passed in the last decade, Dr. John Morton, where he says, "Mate, you are certainly within the top 5% of fit, functioning human beings with CF across the world. If you are able to keep doing what you're doing, you won't ever have a problem with your lungs." And I heard it, but I missed the first part where he said, if you keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so I just took my foot off the pedal a little bit, started to maybe take it a little bit for granted. Certainly not sabotaging my health in any way, shape or form, but being a little bit more lax about the daily disciplines like the exercise, the 1 to 1.5 hours of nebulizers where I'd breathe in medication to help move the mucus off the lungs. And so all of a sudden at 18, I was hit with my real first health challenge and my first proper wake-up call to say, hey mate, you're living with a condition called cystic fibrosis, where my lungs started to bleed and I started to experience real scarring and almost now this downhill slide that occurred over the next 5 years that really tested my health.
If you're enjoying these conversations on this podcast, why don't you come to the retreat? March 16th, Elevate with Mets. You can have these one-on-one conversations while also bettering yourself with other people around you. Hit the link in the bio and come and join us. Before I ask my question, I want to tip my hat to not only yourself, mate, but your parents. To walk out of a doctor's office because they didn't hear what they wanted to hear is extremely powerful. And yeah, I'm just in awe of the start of the conversation. So I'll tip my hat to you and your parents.
Well, I
mate.
appreciate that because I feel eternally in debt to my beautiful parents
Unreal.
for their mindset towards all of this, because as you can imagine, when you're hearing that, you are essentially thrust into the world of this is going to be a very challenging life for our child. And as a parent, you would feel that cut deeply because you've seen all the sad stories and you've read all the sad statistics. And, at the time, CF was considered the childhood's disease because you just didn't grow up into your adult years. Now there is a fruitful picture of a life expectancy that looks like 41 that I certainly don't believe will be my lifespan. I believe that CF won't end my life. I reckon I'll have kids that are telling me to kick the bucket so they can get some inheritance. But for a lot of people, we're seeing a dramatic increase in life expectancy, but also the quality of life due to new medication. But, I was born into a time where there wasn't much promise for that. And so for my parents to act, not even out of belief, but blind faith, that they could do something to change that narrative for me is exceptional. And, for probably the first, and even maybe to this day, they are ducks, who exist calmly on the surface of the water, but their legs are kicking for life beneath because you can't help but worry and care for the future quality of life of your first child. And that they've been a huge part of my life. Even to this day, I speak to both of them 2-3 times a day.
What is the average age that people live to?
It's 41 at the moment.
41, okay.
We expect to see a jump in that due to some new medication that's made a massive impact for people over the course of the last 3 years. And, it'll probably start to push into the 50s and 60s. But I exist as a bit of an abnormality, which I don't take for granted, that because of the function of my health right now, touch wood, no other challenges outside of my control come my way over the course of the next few decades. But I believe that I can try and kick that 100 barrier, mate.
But
There's no reason why I
ask,
shouldn't.
the 5 years where you sort of let yourself go, what was that like?
Challenging.
Like, were you like going, fuck, I'm struggling here. This is going to be a fight to get out of this. What do I do to myself? Like, what was that internal dialogue like?
It's interesting. I guess we can keep using the metaphor for the gym, right? On December 31st every year, people start to set some New Year's resolutions. And I think whilst there's a novelty to that, right, there's something great about that because regardless of how irrational it sounds, that the year kicks off on Jan 1st, it does, and it gives people, I guess, a starting point to try and move in a upward trajectory or towards their goals and, you know, a better life for themselves. And, you know, there was essentially a 5-year period in which I would have a kind of a health crisis every year where something would go wrong with my CF. And it gives you this immediate reality check that life is finite and certainly not guaranteed. And you are challenged by something that not a lot of people are, and you need to consider that in the way that you go and live your life. And, you know, that was for me in the form of these lung bleeds that, you know, the first time you have a lung bleed, you think you're dying. Because you've been told up until this point as someone with CF, especially someone with liver disease, that if you ever cough up fresh blood, it's a matter of getting to the hospital ASAP or you could die.
Yeah.
So the first time you experience that and the circumstances of my first bleed, there was every reason to believe it was something bad and that I was going to die. And so it's a massive wake-up call, right? There's a great Confucius quote that every man lives 2 lives. The second begins when they realise they have one. It opens your eyes. But I started to have these relatively consistent challenges within, particularly infections in my lungs, that could have been damaging and unforgivable long term. And, you know, they started to chip away at my lungs. I was seeing my function reduce. So for a great portion of my life, like probably an 8-year portion there between 18 and 26, my lung function operated at about 74 to 76% of the normal. And so you certainly notice that when you're trying to exercise, it's a little bit harder than it used to be. And I felt like almost in constant fatigue all the time. I was actually talking about it this morning with family. There's this feeling that until you're out of it and you feel good again, you kind of remember, God, I feel like I used to live in a bit of a fog where it was harder to get out of bed in the morning. And it becomes, the scary thing is, it becomes kind of your new normal. And as I was saying, you have these crisis moments and you've got all this motivation. You're like, all right, I'm going to change it. I'm going to get back into shape. I'm going to start doing all the things I used to do to be well. And you do that for 1 or 2 months and then you kind of fall flat on your face again and you're back in the same spot a year later. It's like, why? Because I never had a bigger purpose or reason that I could attach it to. And for me, I guess the major wake-up call, which is a part of the first question you asked me, Metz, is like, what is the moment in which it was a wake-up call and to go, hey, I'm going to move back in that right direction, was 24 years of age. I'd been on a bit of a journey the last 6 to 12 months before that to figure out my life again. I'd lost a bit of passion, purpose, direction. My health was the worst it ever had been. And I felt like my life was moving backwards, not forward. And I certainly want to make clear, I never felt like a victim. I always knew that there was a level of control that I had. I never felt like life was happening to me. I was always a big believer that I can turn this around. I just needed to find my flow and set up my life in a way that allowed me to do that. And so I had left my job 2 months earlier in real estate at the time. I had started this podcast thing. I was so blissfully ignorant to how challenging it would be and believed that I could be at Rogan level in 2 years. I had this absolute blind faith and optimism. I've never struggled to believe in myself. And it was pushing me in a trajectory towards I was starting to feel a little bit more meaning and purpose and place in my life. I was more motivated. I was starting to do some things to look after my health. And I'd actually started to run. Now, I was a sprinter as a kid, but anything over 400 metres was distance, right? And I hated it. Didn't want a bar of it. And it was COVID times. We were allowed out for an hour in the mornings and I'd go for a walk along the beach. I lived in a beautiful spot in Wollongong, jump in the ocean, and I bumped into this fella and he said, oh, you should come to this run club on Sunday morning. We meet at 6 a.m. and, you know, we go for a 5K run. We have a coffee and a chat after. And, you know, the world was starting to open up slowly again and we were able to do that. And I was craving a bit of human connection as we all were. And I thought, oh yeah, I'll do that. And I said, how far do you run? And he goes, oh, we run 5K. And I was thinking, how the fuck am I going to run 5K? No, not at the time. I had some holy ultra
Mate, you know
boost,
you're
right?
talking about Mookas, fucking I've had it all week.
Yeah.
And I just got it in my fucking throat.
Yeah, it comes sporadically.
No,
And,
I'm getting better. I'm on the mend.
Oh,
but
good.
I feel like
Good.
fuck.
Need to clear that stuff, mate.
No.
You need to clear that stuff. So yeah, essentially I was like, I'm going to go and have a crack at this thing. And 5K felt so tough.
Yeah.
But I rocked up 4 weeks in a row. I got through it with great difficulty. And on the 4th week, I'd run the 5K that morning. I felt a little bit fitter, but I felt something like a little bit loose in my lungs.
Yep.
And I couldn't really explain it. It almost felt like there was liquid moving around my lungs. And a couple of hours later that day, I had relatively bad lung bleed that put me in emergency, and I ended up back in emergency 3 nights in a row. And on the 3rd night, sitting there with my old man, it's about 2 a.m. in the morning, waiting for some test results to come back to see how much blood I'd actually lost, whether I needed a transfusion, but I'd stabilised and I felt okay. And most of these bleeds naturally stabilise themselves and stop, right? And as I was sitting there with Dad, I felt, regardless of the circumstances, like a real positivity for my situation, because I had found a bit of passion and I found something to strive for again. And I was starting to surprisingly enjoy this running thing. And I said to Dad, you know what, regardless of what's happening right now, I think it'd be a great goal for me to go and run a marathon at the end of the year. It was mid-July at the time, and Dad just backed me. He's like 100%, my whole family backed me. So I come out of hospital, had to recover for 2 weeks, and I set my sights on an event that we named 42 for CF. I had found contact after announcing it on socials with the, at the time, CEO of Cystic Fibrosis Australia. I said, why don't we try and raise some money through this thing? There was a group of 13 of us that put our hand up to do it together. And actually a guy from up here, Ben Seymour.
Oh, yeah, Benny.
Benny's a weapon, and I had him on my podcast at the time, and I reached out to him to ask if he could write me a program, and he said, mate, I'll train you every day for free and I'll come run it with you.
Jeez.
And so Benny sort of became my guidance through that, my physical guidance, and essentially a roller coaster journey of lung bleeds and difficulty, you know, clocking distances every week. But essentially it was ended up completing it December that year. We raised 56,000. It got me on stage sharing my story. It connected me with a greater community of people who were interested in what I was doing. And for me, it was a real change in my life that gave me this incredible insight that just purpose fuels progress. And I felt like I had a purpose to try and uplift and inspire some people who were experiencing similar difficulty and circumstances to me through the vehicle of running this marathon, and it changed my life.
What a journey.
Mate, you spoke about mindset. Now, when you said to not become a victim of your circumstances, that sort of blows my mind, because you have every opportunity to slip into that mindset. And, you know, we have moments of our days, our weeks, our whatever it is, where doubt comes up, the inner critic, all those sorts of things. I'm interested to know, what did you do to not fully dive into a victim mindset, and who was there to support you with that?
Well, you know, to answer the question around support, my family has always been there, and a great group of mates. Like, I've always been very open about the fact that my greatest blessing in life is my people. You know, whether it's my fiance now, my parents, my sister, my group of mates, I'm so eternally blessed for the people I have around me. And it's just a beautifully supportive, connected circle of people. And if I think about the circumstances that encourage you out of that kind of victimhood or self-sabotage, like everyone, I'm human, I'm immune to it. I'm not immune to it, sorry. There are moments in which you feel sorry for yourself and, you know, you lick your wounds because you're going through something difficult or challenging. But I think the marker of any great person who's able to overcome difficulty in their life is how quickly they can flip the switch and get back to a place of gratitude and positivity. And I'm a big believer that because of a life with cystic fibrosis, there are plenty of people I've met along the way who've had it way harder than me. And I think if you've got the power of looking at things through a different lens, changing the perspective and the way that you perceive the events of your life as they happen to you, you know, if you perceive them as, I'm a victim, this is horrible, why me? You remain stuck in the mud forever. If you can choose the way you see it, you change your ability to move forward. And, you know, I spent plenty of times in hospital. I remember being 9, meeting a young man who was across the room from me. His name was Krishnan. I was in just for what they called a tune-up at the time. Essentially, you go in, they check everything, they make sure you're well, they give you some lung treatment over the course of 2 weeks. But I was in Sydney Children's Hospital for that time, and so I was not unhealthy by any means or sick by any means. I was there for the yearly checkup at the mechanics, right? And I was in a room of four of us young guys. My parents slept beside my bed every night, and these other 4 boys were often there by themselves. But this one particular kid, the smiliest, most energetic and happy young man, who became a great friend of mine in that 2 weeks, Krishnan, was fighting leukemia. He's going through chemo and radiotherapy every day. I'd never seen his parents sit beside his bed. And every night, he'd wet the bed because of the chemo and the radio. He'd often go hungry because he didn't like the food. And then we got there, and my parents, being the generous and kind souls they are, and just the absolute fucking angels on earth, start buying this kid dinner every night as they're buying, because I was a spoilt little prick. I didn't like hospital food, right? So they're buying me food from outside of the hospital every night. And so we'd feed Krishnan too, and then they'd buy him new pajamas because he'd wet the bed. But I just seen how, regardless of how shit his circumstances seemed to be, there was never not a smile on his face. And so as a 9-year-old kid, I can remember thinking, how could I feel like my life is tough when that kid's going through that and he's going through it alone? And so I always felt a great appreciation, and I always felt incredibly blessed for my circumstances. And I just don't think that's ever not weighed on me. Fuck, it's so much harder for so many people. Like, there's times where you get frustrated, right? There's plenty of times where I get frustrated that, man, the pod's not going as well as I'd like it to be, or, hey, like, I'm trying to crush that marathon PB. There's a barrier there, it's not happening. And then I stop and I look around. I've got a beautiful life partner who I'm marrying this year. I've got a healthy family. You know, I'm 28. I'm physically fit enough to go out and run for 2 hours on a Sunday. I get to hop in the ocean afterwards, and I go to a job where I get to go into nice houses and call people. It could be harder.
Well, so I like that. Sometimes the pod's not going the best. Sometimes my running's not going the best. But what have I got to be grateful for? And it's funny because you seem like an ambitious individual. So you're always looking at stats and data. And even being in the agency, that's what we look at, right? You look at what's the market doing right now. Fuck, all right, it's dipped. What do I need to do? How many phone calls do I have to make? So you're constantly looking at data, and sometimes that data isn't going to show you what you want to see. And then you've got to be able to conceptualize that and go, okay, mate, just go back to the basics, stay consistent, focus on doing your posts, focus on doing your podcast, it will grow. Is that the mindset that you sort of like go back towards gratitude with, where you go, mate, it's going to have its ebbs and flows, like your health. Like, some weeks it's unbelievable, everything's working perfect. But I think we look at, in life, and this is everyone, me included, the perfect conditions all the time.
Yeah, you know, one of the biggest insights of last year for me, when I sat down in December and I went back and looked on the year that was, is that life is not linear. You know, you have this idea in your head that every year you show up to work, you go forward in your financial abundance, you show up in your relationships and your connections go forward, you show up at the gym, you look like Sonny Bill. Like, that is not the truth of life. Life is certainly not linear, and there's absolutely no examples of people who have gone from A to point B in a straight line without any bumps or curves or challenges along the way. And so when you boil it down and you go, well, life isn't meant to be measured, right? So all of the things in life that make your life incredibly fulfilling aren't things that you can put on a scale and measure the metric of. You know, I heard this great insight from Chris Williamson, where he was speaking about we often in life trade observable metrics, we trade hidden metrics for observable ones. So we trade the peace or tranquility we have of our morning routine for more work in order to make more money. We trade the relationships we have.
There's always a trade-off.
There's always a trade-off. And it's harder to understand what you're trading off when you can't measure it. Like, how do you measure happiness? How do you measure love? You can't, you just feel it.
When I pat my dog in the morning, I'm only joking. It's the only one that shows love back.
But the truth is,
all the time.
The truth is, right, you can only feel that,
but
right?
I do feel like that.
Yeah.
I'm patting the dog. You know, it's funny. That's the only time I feel love, bro. I'm being honest. And when I talk to my mum in Turkey.
Yeah.
That's it.
Can I ask you a question? We're in the process of we're picking up a dog in like a week. We're
Yeah.
very excited. What do you think a dog does for you as a human?
Look, listen, I'll tell you what my fucking dog done to me. So it's 8, 9 years old.
Yeah.
I swear to God, when I got that dog, you know how long I've been on the lounge for? Out of those 8 years, I'd say 7 years and 8 months. Yeah.
You feel like, do you mean like you feel like it slowed you down or sped
No,
you
I'm
up?
on the fucking lounge. Like, not in a bad way.
Mm.
I was on the lounge because, you know, I wanted to be there for the dog, and then, you know, like when they're babies, you know, it's my fault. It's my fault. And I struggle to lately I've been going to bed more.
Mm.
Like lately, I'm talking, it's going on 9. Lately I struggle to go to bed more. But what it is, it's like it's unconditional, right? So like, for example, they're happy every day when they see you. So that's the best part. My dad said this to me, right? My dad's passed away, but he had the best one-liners. I'll never forget this, right? So most Turks, my brother, you'd see a film Wollongong, they don't go in the ocean more than knee deep, right? You know what? Jimmy's a good mate of mine. He gives me his paddleboard, stand-up paddleboard, right? I had it in my garage. I was living at Brighton at the time. My dad used to come and help me mow the lawns, you know. Like I think it was every second Friday, and he'd come down and he'd look at my garage and he'd go, "Mate, what's that paddleboard doing here?" I said that, and Dad was a mad wog, so he couldn't speak much English. This is in Turkish. It sounds better in Turkish. Okay, Dad, it's my mate. He goes, "Who's your mate?" I go, "Jim Dimmick." He goes, "Who the F's that? Like, who's that, you know?" I go, he's a mate of mine. He, you know, he played a bit of league. He goes, "Mate, in our family, we don't do water sports." Tell him to take that out of here. So when I got the dog, when we were kids, we had a German Shepherd and a Rottweiler. He never wanted the dogs, but he was affectionate towards the dog. When I got the dog, he goes, "Mate, let me just tell you," and this is the funniest one-liners. He goes, "That dog is going to age you." I mean, what the hell is this guy talking about? I've fucking been on the lounge for more than 7.5 years. And I realised what he meant. I'm not going to get enough sleep. Sleep's going to age me. But I go, what's this guy talking about? So like for me, it was like, you know, and it's hard. It does. It's a lot of work. And if you said to me, would I get another dog after this one? I'd say no way in the world. And I've done it for the kids, and like my dad done it for us, for the kids.
Mm.
We were the kids. I'm not saying people shouldn't have dogs, but you know, like what he said to me in that moment, I was like, and I used to tell my mates, they go, "Mate, your dad comes with the best one-liners." But he said, "That dog will age you." And I'm going, what are you talking about? And what he meant was, you're going to give it everything you got, and you're going to want to do these other things. And it's one other thing to think about that you don't need in your life. And I think we all do this in our lives. Like, I love podcasting, so I always wanted to do this again.
Mm.
But there's certain things that I like a lot, but that are too much of an effort. And I'll give you an example. When I started doing the podcast, I was doing it in my lounge. This was 9 years ago. Again, you know, in the mindset of being a Joe Rogan, you know, so you have this dream. And then it was in another mate's studio, but we could never get in. So then when we created this one, I said, how can I create something where I can do it whenever I want, right? Obviously the timing and all that, and where I've got total control of it. And this was the room.
Mm.
And this room wasn't like this. It was a mess. Like, we had to do absolutely everything for it. We had to create the acoustics, and then I'll never forget, Kenny was here. This room was nothing. And we were in Melbourne, we were shooting a video, and I go, "Kenny, I got no idea how to do this, bro." And he goes, "What are you going to do?" I go, "I'm going to fucking do it." I go, "I've spoken to a few people, and I got no idea what I'm talking about." And to this day, like when we were creating it, we didn't understand it perfectly. But now that Kenny's been in here and he's in that, you know, in that scene of doing podcasts, he's doing his own podcast, he knows a lot more now. And then we've got, you know, the Google sheet of where we bought everything from. So that process helped me to learn that next thing that I needed for myself. But going back to the dog, I knew that like I know every time we go overseas, I've got to find someone to look after that dog.
Mm.
And I know also how it affects my wife. And I know my kids won't do what myself and my wife do. So I know the amount of effort that goes into it. But I also know that everyone in the family loves the dog, but I understand the effort as well. And sometimes when you look at life, you go, you want the dog, but do you understand what comes with that?
Mm.
And that's always the hardest part. Like it really, really is like, and I never say to anyone, don't get a dog, but I go, man, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And like my dad said, he goes, that dog will age you. And I do believe I've got a lot more grey hairs.
Just from the dog.
Fucking have to. I'm going higher on the fade and I can see greys coming everywhere. And the higher I'm going, people go, what are you doing?
I don't have a dog and mine are popping through.
But I'm
so it's, I'm like...
But that's
Get ready.
The thing is, you get that unconditional love. But like look, for the life of me, I'll never forget that comment he said.
Yeah.
And if it's funny, because my dad passed away in and around when that dog came.
Mm.
And it's like, it's symbolic because it makes me think about my dad a lot. So when I'm with the dog and I'm on that lounge, in some fashion, I'm thinking of my dad. I'm thinking of every little thing he used to say to me. My dad was one of the most simplest guys. He didn't want much at all. And I always go back to that. Like, people ask me, what do you want in life? I go, not much, man. I do complex things, but I really want a simple life with the freedom to do what I want to do. You know what I mean?
Do you think that's a very European mentality? The simplicity of living life in a way that is less complicated?
I wanted complicated, but I realised that that's not going to bring me happiness. Like that wasn't bringing me anything. You know what I mean? And so I think, with like we talk about you were off camera. We're talking about how Mark Burris, and I've watched him, where his parents were immigrants and they were doing it tough, and they were hard workers. My parents were the same. So I look at simplicity, and even with my in-laws, they're Italian, and I see how they're very simple people, hard working, great family, and I want to do complex things, but want to have a super simple life.
Yeah, it's interesting when you break it down and you get to, I've been blessed enough to have a few trips out of the country in my life, and I went on a solo trip in 2022, and it was a life-changing trip for me in the sense that it gave me a lot of valuable insight on what I wanted from the next chapter in my life. And one of the things I found myself doing is, I was over the other side of the world in LA at the time, and it's supposed to be the world of glitz glamour, and most of those things I didn't really like about it. But I found myself through a disastrous sequence of events where my Airbnb was infested with bed bugs and a couple different things happened. I ended up staying last minute. I was going to be homeless in LA, which would have been very ironic. But I found myself in downtown LA, staying in this like relatively nice hotel, because it was in downtown, it's pretty affordable, right?
Yeah.
And as I'm driving over in the cab there, the cab driver looks at me and goes, "You Australian?" I was like, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "Mate, don't walk around by yourself at night here." And I'm thinking, like, I'm no weapon of mass destruction, right?
Yeah.
But I've never walked the streets as a bloke. Like, you take this for granted as a bloke, right? But you never really walk around the area that you're staying in when you travel or when you're at home and feel particularly unsafe, right? You feel like a relative comfort. Like, I can run, I can move around. I had gout at the time, so I couldn't really run, but I felt confident in just like kind of staying out of trouble. So I'm thinking this guy's been over the top. Mate, when I tell you this area was disastrous, people walking around with tasers behind me, screaming across the streets. Like, at every given point in downtown LA, you feel like you got to hold your pockets.
I've been in downtown.
Right? It's unique.
Yeah.
Now, every morning, regardless of whether I was in LA or New York, there were 2-3 things that I wanted to do. I wanted to get up, I wanted to exercise, I wanted to go have a coffee, and I wanted to have either a stimulating conversation or hear a stimulating conversation. Nothing changed. I was on the other side of the world, and my routine, the things that I wanted, didn't change. Of course, I was experiencing new things, I'm seeing new things, I'm in a slightly different culture, but at the essence of me, I wanted the same things. And so I boiled it down. I said, okay, what are the pillars of my life that I need to live a good life? First was like relationships and connections to people I care about. The second was my health. If I don't have my health, I don't have anything. The third was I need some kind of meaningful work that makes me feel like I'm doing something to help other people. And the podcast and my speaking on stage gives me that. The fourth was my environment is so important. The environment I exist in and the way it makes me feel is so, so important. Then the fifth was, and the fifth came as a bit of a later insight, I need to constantly be developing and learning, whether it's developing myself physically or learning about the world. For me, it keeps me interested, keeps me sharp. Now, those 5 things, pretty simple.
March 16, Elevate with Mets retreat in Thailand. Listen, I've done a few of these, but this one by far is going to be the best. We are getting ready, our clients ready way before they get there. They're going to have everything from nutrition, mindset, training. This is going to be the transformation of your life, and it's going to be done in 2 stunning hotels in Thailand. Can't wait to see you there. Hit the link in the bio, and let's get you started. It's exactly how I am. Like, we talk about development, like constantly developing myself, learning, new ways to become better. We're talking about, our grid, how I'm going to make him better. We're talking about how we're going to make that better, how we're going to make, like, each of these, like, simple things better. You're doing the thing, but you just want to make that better. And like you said, you want to go have a coffee and just want to just see people, conversations, learn, I believe when you bring it down to that, you actually have a happier life. Like when people go like, what is it? When you bring it down to that simplicity, right? I was having a chat to one of my staff members, and I said, I get worried when people they want to be friends with everyone. I get really, really worried because I know it's going to just end in disaster. Because we're going to get let down anyway. So we're going to give ourselves more of a chance to get let down. And that happens when you're younger, right? It happens a lot more when you're younger. We got dinner tonight. I thought it was called off. So I was kind of happy. And then I hear it's back on. And I'm like, and then my wife goes, you're boring. Like, you don't do anything. Like, I don't want to go to dinner. And I feel bad because Clayton's messaging me, goes, we're on for dinner. Man, fuck me dead, man. I feel like I'm a kid again. That pressure of wanting to go to dinner, and I don't want to go. And then you question yourself. You go, am I boring, or do I just like things more simple than it is right now? And it's funny because a lot of the times you want to get invited to something because you're not doing nothing now. So you're trying to fill that void, and you don't even want much of it. You just want enough of it. But I think when you bring it down to that, you're in LA, downtown. I've been downtown. Interesting part of the world. But so is Santa Monica and all those areas. They've gone worse too. But when you look at that whole area, such a beautiful area, but you just want it super simple, and that's where I feel like people will find more fulfillment. You can be super successful with the simplicity. You know what I mean? And everyone, like, I've heard this many, many times where people have all these things and they don't feel anything. You can buy whatever you want. Obviously, it's good to have money. It's financial freedom, I reckon, is the best. Because you can get on a plane and go anywhere whenever you want. And, you're like me and probably Jake, we're probably very similar. We want to go and experience different places in the world. But for me, what I've learned is I go, if I can create financial freedom and simplicity, do whatever I want, I just want a simple life. Exercise, eat well, be around good people, be around a good environment. I think that makes a huge difference because you've interviewed a lot of people. And do you, like, from your podcast, do you get a lot of that? Do you see a pattern forming? Because like even when we're interviewing rugby league players, there's this pattern. And the patterns hardly ever change.
Well, I think that one of the biggest lessons that I've learned through the podcast is it's made me very empathetic because you can look from your high horse at anyone's situation or circumstance and you can go, you can look at someone who's addicted to drugs and you can go, God, how do you get addicted to drugs? It's going to be destructive. right? But then you hear their story and the circumstances of their life, and while you can't understand it because you haven't lived through it, you can see why drugs made them feel something they'd never felt at home. Or you can see why the experiences of their life informed them to make decisions that you wouldn't have made, right? So it made me very empathetic. 260 episodes, you hear such a range of different stories. You start to understand that life is more complex than you can ever understand it for different people. The other thing is that you start to see that, yeah, like on the surface, once you actually get past what somebody does for work and the experience of their life, they want many of the same things that you do, right? Whether that's conscious or unconsciously being called to them at that point in their life. There was a really valuable moment for me when I sat down with Dr. Charlie Teo, and he was at the time going through a very challenging time of his life. He's in the news, he's being prosecuted, very difficult. And he come to my house in Wollongong. I picked him up from the soup kitchen, a couple streets away, and nobody knows that he works at the soup kitchen, but I've told people because I think it's valuable to see the kind of character that this guy is. And I picked him up and he come to my house and we sat down and I started to ask him about why he does what he does. Like, you've been prosecuted, dragged through the coals, people have been calling for your head. I would say more people have been praising him for the work that he's done. I think he's an incredible human being. I said, why do you continue to do what you do? He was operating overseas, he still is. Because Brad, very early in my career, I was blessed to go on a trip up to the top end of Australia. And he said, I was on this trip, I think it was around like 7 or 10 days, he said, camping trip where we were traveling from area to area. And it was a bunch of very successful people, all from different fields, some people from finance and different worlds. But he said, obviously me being from my world, in the medical world, a brain surgeon, I was on this trip and he said, we'd sit down by the campfire every night without fail. Every night as we'd sit there and we'd talk and we share life experiences and ask each other questions, someone new every night would break down about the fact that they had all of this money and abundance in their life, but they felt very empty. And he said, and I remember sitting there and feeling very privileged because no matter what was happening in my life, no matter how much abundance I had or lack of something, every day I felt like my life had meaning because I was giving people hope. And I remember hearing that and thinking, isn't that a beautiful message that, kind of like I said earlier, we give our lives meaning. And if you can find a way to do some good in the world, whether that's the way that you treat your immediate people, whether that's through the work that you do, or just the way that you get up and you start to live your life with intention, I think it's that simple.
Yeah.
I think it's that simple.
I love that.
We go through periods of life with our egos as an example, right? Which the ego gets a bad rap, but it's actually designed to protect us. But what it does is it wants to label everything out there instead of looking at itself. So when we listen to you guys speak now and life experiences where we've gone and stuff like that, we're always searching for an answer to a question we haven't yet received by being in the same place. We have to venture off, right? We have to become quiet. I feel, and I'm getting it now in my life as well, as if we can create calmness within ourselves, because the world is chaotic. There's everything is going on, moving parts we're not even fully aware of yet, all these things. If we take the time to get to know ourselves, instead of trying to figure out everyone else, because that's impossible. I don't know what you think, I don't know what you think, I don't know how you move. I can observe things, but still again, why am I trying to figure out someone else when I still got things that I need to work on? I think that's humility in itself, because when you can become a better person, the experience becomes a little bit more fluent for you, you know? And I feel listening to you talk, you're going into this little period of your life where, you know, everything seems to be falling into place for you after you've gone through like a turbulent last decade. How you spoke about, you know, the teenage years with going through those sorts of mind games with your health, you know, that 18-year-old sort of period. My word to you is resilience. What does that mean to you from, let's say, 10 years old to now? What's changed for you with resilience?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jake. And even just to mention quickly before I answer what you said there, it's really interesting. So I just had last week, for the second time on the podcast, I had this really brilliant woman, Katarina Kuhn. She's a neuroscientist who specialises in the neuroscience of self-knowledge, so essentially human personality and behaviour. And she's developed this model that she calls Deep Sphere, and it tests the way that you're hardwired as a human being. You go through this 5 to 10 minute assessment, you answer a bunch of different questions honestly, and it essentially gives you a reading of how you're wired at the neurochemical level. So there's 5 primal emotions of human behaviour and personality. They're rank, care, guard, seek and play. And I've done this assessment a couple times now, and it's been pretty bang on every time, sort of the same thing. And I did it again the other night just as a refresher, and it categorises me as a harmonizer, high care, high rank, right? So essentially it means that I am, when you read through this report, it says that at the essence of who I am, I'm very much driven by high care, right? Which makes me want to love and be affectionate and spend time with the people that I value in my life and the things that I value. It also predisposes me to caring a little bit more about social proof. Certainly feel that in myself, right? We're all a little bit guilty of that at times. I'm also high rank, which means I'm very driven, very A-type personality. I'm ambitious. I want to achieve things, but rank also predisposes you to being the kind of person who's walking around the fancy European car dealerships looking for something that's going to make you feel like you're maybe at a higher level in society, right? I don't feel that as much as I feel the drive and the ambition, but it's certainly something to be aware of. The interesting one is the harmonizer. It says harmonizer driven by high care, high rank. And when I read through this report, it talks about how you're never trying to enforce your opinion or your feeling on other people, but rather you're interested in hearing what they have to say without breaking harmony. And I think it's a huge product of being on the podcast for so long, because I used to be so much more opinionated than I am now. But I just realised I'm at a point in my life where I can't always understand what people are doing, but it's not my place to.
And that's what I'm alluding to. So what I learned on my sort of healing spiritual journey is there was a word that everyone used to say, acceptance. Well, okay, but there's things that I just blatantly don't accept. As an example, a pedophile, right? That's me though, right? But I think the healthiest word is to allow everyone to be who they are, because that's healthy, because I'm going to be myself. So therefore I must allow everyone else to be themselves if that's what I want to be. And I think, like, what I would like you to send me that link of that thing that you did. I'd actually like to do that.
I will. You can actually still do it for free today.
Excellent.
So she gave a 72-hour free link for everyone who listens.
Excellent. So there's similar things, and I'm always curious of myself, because I catch myself in certain moments of my day where I become agitated, and I'm like, why? There's nothing that's a threat. I feel for myself at times it's when I'm getting new information, because I'm trying to...
You can, I noticed that about you.
You know,
when I'm giving you new information, I could see your face.
And I'm trying to process it.
So when I say something to Damien, his face is a little bit different.
Yeah.
He's freaking out sometimes, but I can see his face. It's funny, I look at people's face when I'm giving information. And I always say to everyone, it's funny, and I was having a chat to Kenny about this yesterday. He goes, everyone takes information differently. I go, this is what I say to everyone. You're going to take this personally. I know you are, because I take everything personally. But this is going to actually help you. So just be aware of it. Everyone's going to take everything I say personally. And so straight off the guard, off the bat, that individual goes, fuck, all right, I'm going to take this personally. But I've warned them. And I've found that becomes a bit easier, because they're still going to take it personally. Because it's like someone's judging your character. So as soon as someone judges your character, the first thing you'll do is you go, that's not me. But really it is you. There's some form of the feedback they're about to give you. There's something there. There is. Whether you like it or not at the time, that's up to you. But at that point, there is something like... I've had that many conversations with people, and I've had people that have come back into the business. And they've always said, fuck, you were right about what you said about me. You know, I have this thing. I said, I wasn't having a dig at you. Okay, you're just a product of the environment. That's not even you, but you think that's you. But during that time in your life, if you look at the people, like I was watching now, the people that you're around, That was a product of them. That was you. That wasn't even you. You thought that was you. So like at every point, when I'm talking to you, don't even know this, but when I'm saying something to you, I'm thinking of your time at the Dragons when you didn't take things on. I'm the same too sometimes. Like my wife will go, "You're going to get pissed off at this." I actually get pissed off at her because she's right. That's the only reason I'm pissed off. I go, fuck, how did I miss that? It's the only time they go, "You don't take this well." I go, if I didn't take it well, who's the guy that makes the most changes in everything that we do? I'm just pissed off that I didn't see that and I didn't take action on that. So at every point, there's some sort of feedback, right? And like last week when we were at the front, when that one member said something about the boxing instructor, he was actually right, but what he wasn't right about was giving the chance to the actual class, because the next week it changed a lot because the feedback I was about to give the instructor, but he took judgment on me, right? Which I was fine with because I didn't care. I said, he's right, but I go, I'm irritated right now because I know this instructor is much better than that. But he doesn't know that because he was just going at me like that.
And this is the art of learning about yourself. New is painful. Like, you know how you say the dragon stuff, that also comes back from my childhood.
It came from somewhere before that.
It comes from not actually getting information or being heard or being listened to. You know, so all these little things, and I'm aware of that now. Before, I used to drink. That was my thing. Play footy, train, drink. So that was how I maneuvered through life. Whereas now I'm grateful for new information. Even though at the time I become a little bit ignited because I'm self-aware. Yesterday I just went down the beach, sat there for half an hour, 40 minutes, just allowed it to come through. This is all better for me. You know, as I was talking about before, resilience. That's my form of resilience, is being able to take on new information, process it. Now, how do I be better to move forward?
Well, it's a great question you ask, and I'll answer it now because I think you just touched on a really good point. So I always thought of resilience as the very stoic mentality that is, it's not what happens to you, but it's how you respond to it. If you can respond to the events of your life in some form of way that allows you to endure them and move forward, then you're deemed resilient. But I always thought about how my character was growing through it. And I don't know where that comes from. It's probably just a product of, talk about environment, being in an environment in my household with my parents who were very much those people, right? But then I had a guest on the podcast a few years back, a really interesting character by the name of Tom Nash. Tom wrote a book called Hook, Line and Sinner. He contracted meningococcal at 19, had both of his arms and legs amputated, so he's got hooks for arms, like pirate hooks. Really interesting thinker. And he explained to me this idea that had been used in economics that he has applied to resilience, anti-fragility. He said, when you think about a wine glass, you know that it's fragile. If you knock it over, it hits the ground, it hits a hard surface, it hits some kind of adversity, it will shatter. Right? If you think about a rock is resilient. You can put it under some kind of force or pressure and it will likely withstand it. He said, think about the muscular system in an individual. It is anti-fragile. You put it under stress, and as a condition of that stress, it repairs itself and grows stronger to be able to handle more stress next time. He said, I think as human beings, we need to think of ourselves as not just resilient, but as anti-fragile, right? I'm like, isn't that a beautiful way of putting it?
Different lens that.
The challenge in which I experience allows me to not only have the confidence, if I can withstand it, to know that I'm resilient, but it's an opportunity to grow, whether that be physically or mentally or spiritually or however it may come across. I get to grow from this. And the product of the man I am today, I certainly feel is stronger for all of the challenges in my past. We all experience that, whether you're consciously aware of it or not, right? And I think that you have the autonomy as a human being to decide whether you're the author of your story who takes that into their own hands. Well, I'm going to experience some challenge and I'm going to be stronger for it, and I'm going to allow it to inform the way that I move on from here for the rest of my life. Or you can be the paper in which the story is written on, where you're the victim of your circumstance and life is happening to you and you've got no hand in it. And I think it's that simple. That's not to say it's easy, but it's that simple, right? We don't have to overcomplicate it.
We have the tendency to do that. This is such a great conversation to have, and I like where it's gone in regards to just mind, like our minds, you know, like we are almost 50, mid-30s, you're coming into your 30s. There's all different lenses, all different views. Business owner, coming into business and podcasting and all the things you're doing now. And I'm as fresh as a daisy with this stuff. Like every single day, it's probably why I'm, at certain periods of my day I do need to process this, because I'm getting hit with information that I've never really even experienced before.
Amen,
so
brother.
you know what I
Me
mean?
too.
So it's every day's a new experience for me, and I think that's why I'm passionate about wanting more and being more. Whatever more is, I don't know. That experience and that'll come to me as it's supposed to. But I know by turning up and allowing instead of declining, I'll get to where I need to go. I think that's probably the best way I can put it is, I know where I feel I want to be, and we've spoke about it before, whether it's travelling, meeting new people, being open to other avenues of business, whatever may come of it, because we're doing the work. At times. Are we getting tested a little bit more than we'd like? Fucking oath. That's part of it though. Whereas before, I know myself, and I'd like you guys to elaborate as well, it's not for me. But it keeps coming back around. So maybe it is. Have you had those sorts of experiences?
Yeah, 100%. Like we were talking about, I was just talking about you, the retreat. I've done three in a year. And, like I'm sitting down with Daria and we were having a chat. And I said, this is what we want to do. And she just turned around. She goes, you're not going to be able to do all that. And to be honest, it's my niece. I really value her opinion. And I said, you know what, you're fucking right. I go, I'm fucking stressed out. I go, thanks for telling me. She goes, like, you got to pull back on something if you want these things to work better. But I knew that. So you actually know. You actually know. But I just needed to hear it from someone I trust.
Yeah.
And then when she said it, I didn't think I lost. Because you always think it's a loss. But I go, I learned a skill set. There's no way I would have learned if I didn't put myself under that pressure. But I've also made myself sick twice, the same time before both retreats. And I realized at that point, I go, fuck, if I simplify things, we can maximize the return. And I said, and the conversation was a little robust, where I put the pressure on her to give me the honest feedback. I go, just fucking be honest, man. What do you see? No, you're taking on way too much. But because you take on too much and you lose the quality. And I realized that I was losing the quality on two ends of it for what I was trying to achieve in the business. But also, I go, if I do this, I'm not going to be able to lead my team and communicate with them better on what they need to be better at and improve on. And then I was, you take inventory of yourself at that point and go, I gotta change things up, because what I wanted isn't what it seems now that I've done it. And there's so much pressure, expectation, and everything that comes with it, where these other things that I'm doing actually make me happier. They're simpler. I'm at home. I'm close to my kids. I'm close to everyone. I can help more people. So the mind, it had to shift, and in the last 2 years, especially after COVID, like like people go, who does your marketing? I go, we do everything now. I go, we used to have it external. I go, and that external didn't allow our team to grow, because they controlled how we do the marketing, rather than us going, this is what we're doing right now, this is working, and now we're going to make it better. Let's make it better again. Let's make it better again. And that control helped everyone in the team grow more, but it also allowed those individuals to feel like they had purpose. So when you take that away from people now, and I realized this because I've done that for 4 years, and they go, fuck, man, no one was getting smarter. And then I was looking at these people, they weren't even happier because there was no purpose, or like when you do a project and you start to feel good, but none of them were involved in the project. Nothing felt great. So when you start to take that away, that starts to affect the team members. And then I felt like I'm taking too much on, but I'm also affecting my team because I'm not there for them to teach them certain things that they need to know. Like even when we were sitting down today, I go, fuck, I've made her busy and she's overworked that she can't help Jake, and I'm doing this fucking other thing. And I go, how am I going to help him? And I go, the only thing that matters here is we're not communicating enough to grow. But I know, well, we know what the problem is. We know what the problem, like we knew. And it was just because I put the pressure on my knees, to be honest.
It's interesting to lean into what you're both saying. As you were mentioning before, Jakey, I feel like something I've learned about myself, at least, is I've got to give myself more grace in getting things wrong in order to learn from those experiences. I don't give myself a lot of grace. I'm very self-critical. Talk about some of the insights from last year. I was highly self-critical last year because I had almost an arrogance that I entered the year with. Well, I've had a couple of years of learning and experience. I should be able to get this, and this right, and I should be able to execute it pretty well. Doesn't go to plan, and you go, man, I'm being really self-critical, and as a result of being more self-critical, I'm kind of setting an upper limit for myself. You know, there's a great book that I'm reading at the moment called Big Leap, written by a guy named Gay Hendricks, and one of the quotes in the book that stood out immediately was, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them, right? And so I've realised that I have to give myself some more grace, and I'm not going to get it right all the time, but don't let that dim my enthusiasm for making up from that and moving forward. And then to what you're saying, Metz, it's interesting. I read a book, or listened to a book, I should say, a couple of years ago, written by a guy named Oliver Burkeman. I become interested in this idea around productivity, right? And I was actually interested in listening to his book off the back of listening to a podcast where they spoke to him. And the book's called 4,000 Weeks. And essentially the premise of 4,000 Weeks is 4,000 weeks is the span of the average human life, right? And so I started to really think about 4,000 weeks. And what does that mean? So in a very finite amount of time, what do you want your life to mean? And what kind of things do you want to fit into your life? And one of the biggest takeaway from the books is he talks about removing FOMO, that fear of missing out, and replacing it with JOMO, the joy of missing out. In order to do the things that I want to do in my life and to do them well, I have to have joy that I'm missing out on other things because I get the opportunity to sink my teeth into this. And for me, that's been a nice reframe because I always feel like I don't have enough time. Even now, like I can make myself emotional thinking about how little time I'm going to have with the people I love, right? Because I want to squeeze the juice out of that. And, you know, I love this idea around in my own life. I think productivity has been hijacked because when productivity came to the forefront of, you know, business and self-development, it was this foundational idea: how can I be better at doing the things I have to do in order to spend less time doing them to afford myself the time of more of what I love and value? And then it got hijacked by the Instagram hustle culture to be, how do I just do more? Well, that's not the point.
It's not.
Tim Ferriss talks about this, effectiveness over efficiency. You just want, you spoke about being effective, like executing on things well. And mate, we have, one of the things I want to say is everything I talk about here, I'm certainly not perfect at. Like I'm 28, I know fuck all in the grand scheme of things. I'm learning, I'm trying things, I'm working it out.
What you've done is you've done 226, it's
262.
Two fucking hell, shit.
Dyslexic moment,
That's
we all have them.
No, well, it's fucking, that's a big amount of podcasts, bro. Honestly, the people that you've interviewed, 262, you know, you can add like 10 years experience from the wisdom that you've gotten from
100%.
those individuals that make you understand more about, like, you know, talk about productivity, you talk about quality, you know, and like sometimes I go like strip it back, slow it down, perfect it more. So every time it looks like a bit of a mess, slow it down, strip it back, make it better, and then you can create speed again. Once you've created speed again, you might have to go back to simplicity again. So it's this thing of going back and forth. But like you said, like, you know, it's, you know, success isn't linear. So it's not that, you know, and if people can start to accept that and go, if I strip it back, I'm going to win more. I'm going to win more in the productivity. I'm going to win more in the quality of what I put out. And I'm going to win more in more people watching what we do, right? And like last week we had a great conversation with George Rose. I felt like it was probably one of my favourite ones. And I said to him, more people should be going on and watching that, because they should. Essentially, they should, because I believe that, but the market doesn't have to believe what I believe. We're not going to win all the time. Like, see this conversation here? It's probably one that's of great insight for more people than anyone else. It deserves to win more. But for me, I can walk away going, whether I win or not in this conversation right now, it doesn't matter, because it was a great conversation that's going to help me for the rest of the year. That's all that matters to me. So you can look at what the win is in there instead of the number. The number is irrelevant sometimes. It's what you learned and took away from that matters more than the actual number we look on YouTube, Instagram, and all these other platforms that look like the win.
Yeah, well, further to what we've been saying throughout the course of this chat is we overcomplicate things. The Italians are great at it, right? The Italians, everything is simple.
Yeah, it is.
I see, get Italy, you have a pizza, and you're like, where's the capsicum? Where's the pineapple? Where's the mushrooms? You're like, well, they don't put 10 ingredients on a pizza here. They put 3.
But
and
even their life, though. But even their life, like Italians live for the day. They don't look at accumulating this. And they look so much happier because they just live for, hey, we're going to go out, have a coffee, we're going out tonight. It's not like they got a massive paycheck. They're like, I think the average wage from where my wife was from was something like 1,500 or 2,000 for the month, which is not a lot of money.
No,
you know
it's
what I mean?
I'm a big fan of the movie Eat, Pray, Love. Great movie, right? And it's not certainly something you wouldn't expect to see on the top list for a guy who's 28's favourite movies, but it's a brilliant one. Makes me feel good. Makes me feel a bit tingly inside, right?
Yeah.
My mum loved that movie, and growing up, I watched it a bunch with her. And one of the great quotes in that movie is when the main character is in Italy, and they talk about, is it dolce far niente or something like that, which is the sweetness of doing nothing.
With the Italian.
Right, it's essentially what I've butchered it, but it's the sweetness of doing nothing, right?
The sweetness.
And just having those moments where it doesn't have to be. And I've learned this. So I'm coming up to the 5-year anniversary of the podcast at the time of recording next week. And I look back and I certainly thought it would be in a greater place amongst the charts and, have reached all these heights of success. And I thought it would be my full-time income by now. It's far from that. But as you said, when I boil it down, I'm like, I've had a great time doing it. And I put a story up about this yesterday saying I'm going to do a nice little anniversary episode and I'm going to go back across the catalogue of chats that I've had and pick some favourite moments and talk about why I love those moments and just make it a bit of a solo pod where I talk about some of that stuff. And if I look back on it and I look at all of those chats over the course of 5 years, someone said to me, why are you still doing it? Like, just out of curiosity, why have you continued to do this thing week on week for 5 years? Can't lie, I love it. And I don't know if you can truly say that you love something until it's cost you a few bickies, until you've had to do it with some resistance, until you've had to find ways to keep it alive. It's why when you look at a partner who you've been with for a long period of time, and you go, we've survived all these challenges in life together. Why? Because we care about each other. It's not about what I get from you or the reward of doing this thing or because it's given me any kind of notoriety. Maybe it's a convenient belief because it makes me feel better about the lack of metric or measurable success of the podcast. But I can genuinely say that I'm still doing it because it means something to me.
But the good thing is you're still 28.
Correct.
Right? And
Lifetime
that's like I'm 48. So it's all relative though. And the reality is that at some point, like you're at 268, at some point there's going to be some sort of other offer that happens in your life where you go, that's why I done it. Like, not you done it because you love it, and and you keep doing it. And it's one of those things that there's not a massive return on the reward, but then there's other things that come with it.
Sure.
There's one other person that will notice your talent. Who knows? Like, we might do massive events here, and we might say, "Hey, Brad, we need you, man, because you speak so well. You've interviewed some of the best people." So behind that comes all these other opportunities that you probably go, "Fuck, look at that. That came from nowhere." And that's I think when you do it, we look at this one thing, and there's probably 5 other things that are going to come with it. And to going back to what you were saying before, you're 20 years younger, so that's a big advantage. Doesn't look like it at the time, because you go, fuck, I'm losing time. Wait till you get 48. But I'm looking at the next 10, 5. I'm going, okay, what does 70 look like, which is 22 years? So it actually goes really quick, because I've been here for 15 years. I've been in the industry for 27 years. And it's just went like that, And the first 14 years were fucking that slow. I was like, get me the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? And that's what it was like. And those first 14 years, like, you go, I just want to get out of this industry. I'm not making anything. This is a struggle. If this is what it is, I shouldn't even be doing this.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? There's to play on the Eat, Pray, Love example, right? A friend of mine, Jack Post, who is Hamish and Andy's producer, he's also co-host of one of the biggest radio shows down in Melbourne on Gold, and Jack and I connected probably two or so years ago through Dylan Buckley, and we started chatting a little bit over the phone, and I had him on the podcast, and one of the things I spoke about was my frustration at the time that I couldn't find a way to make the thing that I really loved, be it the podcast and speaking and all of that, my bread and butter financially. And he sent me a book recommendation to listen to. He called me one afternoon and he was telling me about this book, and he said, I think you should listen to it. And he sent it my way, and it's a book called Big Magic, which was written by Liz, I forget her surname, Liz Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love and is the main character in Eat, Pray, Love, played by Julia Roberts. And essentially the whole premise of the book, she talks about the fact that she wrote 4 or 5 books before she wrote the book that launched her career. And she was speaking about finding love in doing something creative, not because you need it to be the thing that provides you with some kind of life, because that kind of art gives you sustenance. And a real mindset change for me, just to take the stress off my own shoulders of needing everything to be figured out right away. And I've found a lot more joy in the pod since I've taken that expectation away from it.
Well, while we're on the pod, what's your biggest thing where someone has expressed to you and you've gone, fuck, like that's jolted me a little bit in regards to, it could be emotional, it could be information, it could be on relationship, whatever you feel it is. What was the thing where you've sort of sat there and gone, I look at this differently now, or I feel differently towards that?
God, this sounds like I hope this doesn't sound like a narcissistic thing to say, but actually something I said on the pod, which for me turned into a very reflective life period, in which, so 2 of my closest mates, Joe and Ty, who often featured on the pod like every 6 to 8 weeks. I say every 6 to 8 weeks, it always ends up being longer. We get together, and I've got, as I said, a couple of really good mates. These guys have been mates of mine for a long time, and very deep, interesting, different guys who have come from a different experience to me. And we used to have these incredible conversations over coffee in Iran in the morning, and it'd be 2.5 hours together, and felt like we had more to say, right? And we'd get cut short to go to work and get on with life, and we'd always come back and have something new and valuable to chat about. And I said to the guys, I'd love to record just a conversation of us one day, if you're ever up for it. And they're like, yeah, for sure. They'd both been on the pod earlier on in the pod, when I was talking to a lot of people that I knew and a lot of local people. And so we sat down and they said, what should we do for the first conversation? I said, well, I think it's really valuable that as 3 guys between, at the time, our late 20s and early 30s, we have all had very different life experiences. We've got different cultural backgrounds, we have different dreams and visions for our future, we're at different points and places in our life. I think it would be very interesting if we sat down and spoke about topics that were relevant to guys in this late 20s, early 30s, and sort of the distance around that point in our lives. And so the first thing, I was watching Chris Hemsworth has a show was on Disney at the time called Limitless. It was like a 6-part series where he was talking about essentially longevity. In the last episode, he was talking about death. And he went to this institute over in the US. It's run by Dr. B.J. Miller. And essentially it's people preparing to die. Sounds really morbid, right? So they do things like they go and pick out their casket and they lie in it and they see how they fit, and they're at the end of their life, and whether it be a health condition that's gotten them to this place a little bit earlier or they're just very elderly, they've got this very optimistic and playful view of death that seems very unlike Western culture, very Eastern philosophy. And I was watching this episode, and it made me think, if we had to write our own eulogies at our funeral, like, what would we say about our lives? Like, what would it make us think that we regretted? What would we think about, I wish I'd spent more time doing this? Most people get to the end of their life, and if they're lucky enough to know that they're in their final moments, they're hopefully aware that they're surrounded by some people they love, and they can reminisce on some great memories, and they feel maybe a sadness and grief that they're going to leave the people they love, but they feel like they lived a fulfilled life. And I thought it'd be really interesting if we wrote our own eulogies. And so I messaged the boys and I said, hey, for our first episode, why don't we sit down and we all have to write our own 2 or 3 minute eulogy and read it out on the podcast? And the boys thought it was a great idea. And I said, then we can reflect on the topic of death and how we feel about it as relatively young guys. Now, I didn't give any further context as to think about being old age, think about this, that, or the other. It was just very broad. Now, what was really interesting, we sat down on the podcast and all of us had written it as if we were a different age. Like, Ty had written it as if he was 90 and, you know, he's got Kanye playing and it's a celebration at the end of his life and his family's there and everyone's, you know, sad that he's gone, but he lived a good life. Joey, very playful, youthful spirit, wrote it as if he was a guy in sort of his late 40s, early 50s, because he's never really seen himself as an older man, right? Really interesting perspective. Me, I wrote it as if I was dying tomorrow. And I remember sitting down, I wanted to be really intentional about it. Sitting down, I'm writing this thing in my journal, scripting it up, thinking about what I'm going to say. And I was fucking, I was crying my eyes out writing it. I'm a pretty emotional cat, right? Anyone who knows me can say that with certainty. I feel things deeply. And I felt very emotional. And I started to think about, why have I written it this way? Well, I've had enough challenging situations and circumstances in my life that have made me think about my mortality. It's been a part of my daily being. And I've never thought about my CF in a way, like I said, that I'm a victim or this is terrible and I wish it wasn't me. It's given me many blessings and taught me many great lessons. But I certainly have a fear of leaving the people I love early, right, as a result of that experience. And so when I read this eulogy on the podcast, mate, I was a fucking mess. I was crying my eyes out, and it was a very raw, emotional video. And I spoke pretty much solely about the people that I loved. I thanked my parents for all of their incredible effort and said, you know, for the boy that wasn't supposed to live past his early teens and for the guy whose life was supposed to be ruined, he did an incredible job. Spoke about my sister and the role that she'd played in my life. And my sister was this incredible figure growing up, where she's 2.5 years younger than me. I live with her now. Me and my partner live with her and her partner. And we have a great relationship. Fight like cat and dog because we're brother and sister. We take the piss out of each other all the time. It's a very playful, loving relationship. But my sister gave me the greatest sense of self-esteem growing up because she watched her older brother take 50 tablets a day and used to cry because she couldn't take tablets and be like me.
Wow.
So she used to take those, strawberry and orange chewable vitamins. And it gave me this feeling as a young man stepping into school and stepping into life outside of home. Why would I ever feel embarrassed of who I am or what the reality of my life is because the little person I adore the most looks up to me. So my sister's been an integral part of, my journey in my life. And then I spoke about my partner, Soph, who was pretty new to me at the time. We'd only been together for a little period, but I felt a deep and instant connection to her. I'd never been in love in my life, but felt an instant love and connection to her for the kind of human she is and her values and the way that she moves through the world, and I'm eternally grateful for her. And I spoke about how much I'd enjoyed the time that we'd had, but how much I hoped I could have brought a family into the world with her and, had a life experience with her. And so I read all of this and got incredibly emotional. And at the end of this podcast, I'd clipped everything up and I thought twice, I don't want to put this out looking like, because it's quite emotional, it's an attention thing. But I thought, it's pretty valuable because for people to think about, especially at this age, how finite time is and how we are mortal and you don't think about that in your late 20s, early 30s as a guy. You think that you're going to be here forever. I think this would be valuable. And if for anything, I don't think a lot of people are going to see it. It's 3.5 minutes and I cry for a minute in the middle of it and my face is red. I don't think anyone's going to see it, like, to any sheer volume outside of my followers. But if anything, God willing it doesn't, but ever happened to me, an accident, my family would have that saved on my profile to go back to.
That's
right?
cool, yeah.
It's pretty cool. The crazy thing is, I wake up the next morning and it's got 600,000 views.
Yeah.
And I'm getting calls from producers of TV shows and writers and people who are writing for papers and magazines, and they're asking me to talk about this topic of death. And so for the 6 months to follow that, I wrote opposite editorials online for people. I was on Insight SBS for an episode that talked about death. I've done all these pieces and interviews on the back of this, and being thrust into that world where you're thinking about mortality, you realise how much of a privilege death is, because without it, life is meaningless. If you were here forever without any consequence, like, we've all got the same end destination. No matter what you believe religiously, we know that in our physical life on earth, it is going to end, and it makes every day so incredibly valuable. And so as a guy who's not 30 yet, I think about time so preciously. And every night when I get into bed, I feel so lucky. Even we're watching the shittest TV show that I hate at the moment, that my missus loves. I don't find it funny. I don't enjoy it. She knows I don't enjoy it. But I love how much it makes us smile. And so I grit my teeth through it for the time it is going to last. And I enjoy having a cup of tea and being there with her, because I think that this moment is so valuable, no matter how simple it is.
What show is it?
It's called Grace and Frankie.
I thought it was maths.
I
don't know. Whenever I hear these names, I'm like, oh no, I won't like that straight away.
I just can't get into it. Maybe I hope I'm wrong and it gets funnier. But
is it a comedy?
It's supposed to be.
Okay, there
it's
we
just
go.
not my style of comedy is like Adam Sandler, like stupid, goofy stuff that cracks me up.
Well, I think we've got to do a part 2, bro.
I think so.
Because
we've hammered it.
This was a great conversation, and we still got probably. Would you like to come back for a part 2?
100%, I would. Yeah.
And tell us about where can people find you, Brad? Because your podcast, you've interviewed some amazing people. Your insights, absolutely amazing. The books that you've read. 28 years old, you sound way beyond your years. Cystic fibrosis, overcoming challenges. And I take my hat off to you, because having that disorder and then understanding just how precious life is, and that not everyone gets the opportunity to have the insight that you have. But you've gone out there, you've searched for it, you've had your challenges. You're 16 years old, where you took for granted what the doctor said about your health. What's most amazing is this, and you're a deep thinker. Your parents at 5 months were told by a doctor that, he's better off having cancer. You would have obviously gone back to your parents and said, hey, tell me the story about my life and what you guys went through. So you're a very compassionate person. You're a deep thinker. You like to know what people have gone through and why you're in this position. And it's kind of the way I think a lot. Like, I ask my parents a lot of questions about their life, about how hard it was coming here as immigrants, about the hardships. And when things weren't perfect, I kind of understood it, because I understood where they came from. So there was no resentment towards that at all. If anything, there was like, you had it tough. It's my job now, with the platform you've given me, to make something of my life. And, a lot of respect goes out to that, because a lot of people wouldn't go and ask their parents, what did you go through? What happened here? Like, mate, to go and to ask your parents what happened at 5 months, that's a testament to who you are,
Thank you. They're very kind words.
Yeah, but no, thanks for being here, and I think definitely a part 2 has to be on the cards. But I just think something massive is going to happen for you with your podcast. I don't know what it is, but there's going to be heaps of opportunities like that video that you put out. There's going to be far greater opportunities that come with all of that. So
Yeah, I
I want
appreciate
to thank
it.
you. I mean,
Yeah,
how do you
dude.
feel about it?
I'm the exact same, and just that last story you spoke then, like, I'm in a similar mindset. I used to try and perceive what people that I knew would think about what I do, and I've made a real decision in the last 6 months is I'm going to do what I need to do that's going to make my life simple, and one that when I get up in the morning I'm like, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that as well. And remember, like, the day I said to you, like, everyone, it's including your family, like, everyone judges you. They judge you if you win, they judge you if you lose. So you're going to get judged.
Mm.
You're going to get judged on Judgment Day. Like, they call it Judgment Day, but it doesn't matter what religion you pass out in. It's Judgment Day. So you're getting judged then. So you're getting judged right throughout your whole life. So why worry about it?
Just do what you're going to do.
Do what you're going to do. Like, that happens. Like, we're on social media. You got a podcast. You're getting judged. If you're going to put yourself out there,
It's
you're
just
going
what
to get
comes with
judged.
it.
I'm going to get judged on this cold.
Yeah.
I am, mate. I have to cough a few times.
I just
I probably am. It is what it is.
Oh, you crack me
It's
up.
it's a great point, and I think that, you know, if you spend your whole life, it's certainly gonna, like, we're social beings, right?
Yeah.
And so it's certainly gonna have some kind of weight on you, and I don't think you can completely move through the world in a way in which you don't care about what anyone thinks, right? Because
Honestly, you should care about the people that care about your
For
improvement.
sure.
Like, the
For
closest ones. I always say to people, don't take my opinion. Go to 4 people that you really trust, that see it the way I see it. Call close to. They don't have to see exactly, but just ask those 4 opinions.
And I think it's just being able to see the man, woman in the looking glass and go, I respect that person. And they're moving through the world with a bit of integrity, and they've got some
Yeah.
values, and they have fundamental principles for the kind of person that they want to be in the world. And, you know, I admire that. And I think a bit of self-evaluation, you know, this neuroscientist that I was speaking to, she said to me, Brad, our brain is designed to survive and procreate at the core. It is not designed for self-knowledge. And so how does one garner greater self-knowledge? They have to carve aside time to self-reflect and introspect on their life. And so I ask myself those questions as often as I can. I'm not perfect at it, but...
That lady, can you also send me her...
I will.
Because
I'll send you her
I find
link.
what you're saying about her resonates, and I find it very interesting.
I
What
will.
we'll do is we'll put your podcast on our links.
Yeah, awesome.
So that way we can push people there, because you've interviewed some amazing people. You speak unbelievably well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That I think everyone should get on and listen to your podcast. And you're a necessary voice. You've been through a lot, and you're a type of thinker that is only going to get so much better.
I appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thanks so
Appreciate
much
it.
for having me,
No
lads. I
worries.
appreciate
Thank you, my
your
friend.
curiosity.
Thank you.
Cheers.